Alright, as we continue on from here, we're going to need to subdivide the mesh again. So right now I can tell by looking down here at the bottom that I'm at 70,000 polygons. Really for Mudbox, that's really still extremely minimal. So I'm going to hit Shift D to subdivide. Now we're at 280,000 and we'll subdivide again. Alright, 1.12 million. Actually, that should be a pretty good number to work with. We may need to subdivide yet one more time, just because once we start getting to the point where we're dealing with vein detail, we're going to want to add more detail. And you can even tell, like, where we've emphasized the leg muscles, we're still a little kind of chunky in those polygons. So we're going to work on adjusting those muscle masses a little bit more from here. But before we get into being able to deal with the detail of things like veins, we're going to have to subdivide probably a couple more times. So let's grab our sculpt brush and look at adjusting some of the musculature of the chest. Now, since Conan's a pretty big, bulky guy, I want to start really thinking about defining those kinds of bands of muscle that make up the pec muscles. And I'm going to get kind of real loose and sketchy with it for now, because as I come back in with the smooth brush, I'm going to be able to kind of de-emphasize some of the streaking, but still at least keep a feeling of that underlying muscle striation. So we're going to want to go back and emphasize that a bit more, actually, in the center of the chest, where those muscles attach to the sternum. But I do keep some feeling of that across the entire muscle structure. Now, what I want to do is look at emphasizing the insertion point of those muscles and where that muscle mass kind of enters the sternum, and really kind of build that up. Swinging a sword all day long, probably push those muscle bands. So we kind of smooth it back out and kind of push it around so that everything seems to blend together and have a layer of skin over it, but still look like there's a defined muscle structure below. That's looking pretty good. Alright, now same with the deltoids. I want to start emphasizing some of that muscle striation and where it attaches on the top of the shoulder. So as I sculpt, I'm really looking to emphasize the insertion point or the head of that muscle mass, and then to define kind of the direction that the banding of the muscle moves across the body. So we're really just kind of helping the viewer to understand that underlying structure. That's working. And then back to the smooth tool to soften that up a bit. I want to keep just enough to make it feel like there's a layer of skin over some really defined musculature. So we may need to kind of work back and forth over this a couple times and maybe make the brush a little bit smaller to really get that feeling of muscle that's attached to the bone. So now with a smaller brush, we can keep adding those little details that help to make it feel like things actually have variation and subtlety. So even though we're smoothing out a lot of the detail, the subtlety of it's still there. So now we can come back with the sculpt brush and hold on Control to carve negative and start emphasizing where those muscles overlap each other. So now here in the front of the arm, we really want to think about how the negative spaces in this area of the shoulder really affect how the muscle masses overlap each other. So we just try to add some mass to help push that feeling. Smooth it back in a little bit. But it still maintains that overall structure. That's working. Alright, so here in the shoulder, we've enhanced the look and feel of how the deltoid overlaps the pectoralis muscle, but the pectoralis muscle overlaps the bicep. So I think that works pretty good for the shoulder. Now, based on some reference images, I really feel like we need to bring this part of the deltoid up a bit and then really figure out where it attaches to the skeleton. So it was definitely too low down on the back. Bringing it up and actually pushing that detail up a bit more definitely works a lot better. So we can smooth that back in a bit. And then go ahead and add a bit more detail with a little bit smaller brush. So again, as I smooth it back in, all I'm really doing is trying to keep the illusion of that kind of underlying detail. So when we're done, we're really just left with some minimal detail that gives the impression or the illusion of that underlying muscle structure.